Voilà, let's start a little bit in the depth of this afternoon. You see here the picture of the presenter and the panelist. It is also the opportunity to explain to a larger audience that I am currently the work package lead, but this will end at the end of this month. And Robert, who is the second presenter, Robert Stegwee, is currently my deputy, and we will reverse the roles by the end of the month. We have asked 5 panelists to join us. They don't have a presentation, and I will explain you after how that will work. They are not sorted in any way, but I will start with the gentleman on the top, who is a little bit older than me. He told me this yesterday. Hugh Glover is co-chair of a very important HR7 International Working Group, BR&R. He will tell you at the best opportunity what that means. It's terrible, these acronyms. The next gentleman is José Teixeira. Many people know him. He's co-chair of IHE Pharmacy, but he's also very much engaged in the HR7 community as well as in the ISO community. On the lower level, let's start on the right. Jane Miller is representing Snowmade International. Then Marlene Flavad represents the Competence Center in Uppsala, WHO UMC. And Robert van der Stichele is representing IHD in the Work Package 1. All these people, with the exception of Hugh, are involved in Work Package 1. Hugh has been asked to contribute because he has this special role with this HR7 International Working Group. Perhaps also a word about the presenter. Robert Stegwee is the chair of CEN TC 251, so for medical informatics, the European equivalent to ISO TC 215. Well, he has a long track record in the health IT industry, a little bit new in the pharma space, but he gets used for 1 year now. Myself, I'm a lead, I'm the so-called convener for ISO TC 215 Working Group 6. And so that nobody has a surprise, I'm also and mainly working for GS1. I'm going now to give you a few words about UNICOM, and then Work Package 1, and then the gap analysis. UNICOM, you know, I don't want to tell you everything about it because you have a website to consult for that, and a couple of you are already involved in UNICOM. But we have not less than 13 work packages. You have them all listed here, and in bold you have the work package lead, and the name just beside is the deputy lead for that. Pardon me, work package. Work package 1 is one of those which have a transversal role. Many of the other work packages have a very specific role, which is absolutely fine, of course, but Work Package 1 is expected to serve all the work packages and have exchange with all the work packages. How is this Work Package 1 organized? We've found when we were preparing UNICOM that it would be very important to have a place where the standard development organizations and some related organizations work together, exactly to serve all the work packages, to have this competence, you know, in one place. Also because we expect that we will receive, you know, feedback from the implementer, and we want to impact then the standard development or the updates, etc. NICTIS is a Dutch organization dedicated to e-health. NICTIS is actually the active participant in this UNICOM constellation, and two people from other organizations such as GS1 and ISO, namely Robert and myself, are in the umbrella of NICTIS. And then you have, not in a specific order, GS1, Snowmed International, MEDRA, IHD, the monitoring center in Uppsala, HS7 Europe, and we are expecting ADQM to join us very soon. We are working on it. So we have a relatively wide representation of the standard development community in this space. And we have a program. UNICOM is a 4-year project, so 48 months. And you see here the different tasks we have in work package 1. One is IDMP data exchange. The lead is at NICTIS. And you can see the other ones. This gap analysis has been undertaken in the first task, IDMP data exchange. We have other, of course, work to be done. You see the length of the bar shows you the duration of that task. Some of the tasks haven't started yet, which is normal, and some others will stop, such as the number 4, will stop before the end of the project. The gap analysis. The document has been distributed recently, I mean, in the course of September. The document has been distributed in a draft format. The final document has first to be approved by the European Commission, and then it will be the formal deliverable of UNICOM. But the content will not be very far away from this draft, which I hope you have been able to find. The fact is that IDMP has been developed as a CEN and ISO set of standards, and that was at the very beginning under the joint initiative umbrella. The joint initiative, you have the hyperlink lower here on the slide, is a group of standard development organizations working together to have well-coordinated standard produced and avoid gaps and overlaps, and of course also promotes the use of international standard in the health IT space. From the 9 standards around IDMP precisely, we have in the gap analysis identified not less than 100 different standards which are using in a way or another IDMP or IDMP elements to facilitate exchanges with or about medicinal products. What we have also noticed, and I mean, we can only blame ourselves, is that several SDO are developing standards or profile or implementation guides, which is good, but they don't always coordinate. Yeah, that's typical. If you don't have a pilot in that plane, everybody thinks he's the pilot or doesn't need to speak to the other ones because he thinks, that organization thinks they are doing right. And of course, this is a risk for the implementation on the long run. This is something we are addressing also in the gap analysis, not by saying Mr. Jones has done it wrong, because that's not really the purpose, but by encouraging the standard developers to collaborate so that this exchange is easier. The gap analysis, this is really a work which has been developed by the full work package 1. I mean, with that, that's all the experts participating in this work package contributed to it. In their contribution, we needed to organize our thoughts, our approach, and we decided to define 5 implementation domains. And you have them here. I want to comment them very quickly. Development and production, you can easily understand this is on the side of the manufacturer. So including perhaps the preparation of the submission to the authority. The second one, regulation and authorization. Okay, that is relatively easy to understand. It is the national competent authority which is going to verify appropriateness and whatever about this medicinal product or pharmaceutical product. Dissemination and information. After the product has received its marketing authorization, there is a need to communicate. Is it with medicinal product dictionaries in the countries? Is it with tools to support the prescription? So clinical decision support, this space. So we disseminate the information. Then we have prescription and dispensation when we have the fact that, say, a doctor is prescribing, a pharmacist is dispensing, and all the problems they may be facing. And they will be supported by the dissemination and information in their practice. And at the very end, utilization and outcome assessment is actually very important because, our society, we want to understand what happens with this medicinal product on the ground, how many are used, what are they used for, what are the priorities, etc. So this is the way we organize this analysis of the gaps. And you have below the number of gaps or issues, because it's not always a gap, it is sometimes questioning by domain. And you see there are a couple of these issues. For this afternoon, we are not going to speak along all these gaps or issues. We have selected one for each of the domain to be illustrative of the questions we have found and the issues we want to resolve or help to resolve. Robert, maybe you can go on here.
Yes, thank you. What I'd like to point out to you is that we have now this document with everything that's in there, and of course the question is, how do we move forward? We have some idea about the overall process, how to address these gaps and issues. And it's listed here, and I have to tell you, we're just starting. I mean, the gap analysis itself was only published last month, and we're on the 1st of this month, so it's all very new. Basically, what we've done and the process that we will go through also in the future when maybe new gaps arrive is that Work Package 1 will help to identify the gaps, analyze the causes, and maybe also already come with possible solutions in the direction of either the work packages within UNICOM that are asking the questions or have identified the gaps, or towards the standard developing organizations that are owner of the standards and therefore should be made aware of any issues or gaps that we identify. And one of the reasons we want to do this together with the work packages across UNICOM is that we want to coordinate those this analysis and also the solutions, because otherwise you might end up in a situation where people just ping pong with their friend in any of the standard developing organizations and come up with a solution, but nobody else knows about it. So the next time someone comes around and asks someone else, they come up with a different solution. So we want to coordinate the gap analysis across the use cases and the implementation domains so that we really get a coordinated implementation effort of these standards across the 5 domains that we identified. But that's about where we need to stop working as work package 1, because we cannot solve all these problems. We have to hand over some of these problems to the respective SDOs. That's where we are right now, and that's one of the reasons that that Hugh Glover is on this panel, because 2 weeks ago, or even last week, I think, there was the plenary and working group meeting of HL7 International, and we already presented there. So we did start to hand over the issues and gaps from the gap analysis to HL7 International. And we have to discuss them with them. So we hand them over and we keep track of what goes on there and coordinate whenever necessary. And we'll do the same thing next week or the week after with ISO Working Group 6. And we foresee that happening elsewhere as well. So we're really at step 3 in this process right now, and the rest is kind of future thinking. So we really like your questions and suggestions on how to make this work well, because the next step we foresee is that once we've handed it over to the SDOs will discuss the gaps, identify whether we're right or wrong in the identification of these gaps. And of course, we will participate there as well if needed, and we will engage the informed experts, whether they're from one of the UNICOM work packages or from elsewhere. I mean, we don't hold all the knowledge within work package 1, so we really need to engage the users and the people who identified the gaps and can work on the solutions as well. So we'll work together, hopefully, with the SDOs in that space. It's up to the SDOs using their process to come to any conclusion and inform us about how they want to do this, whether they are going to provide a solution and what the timeline could be, so that we know how to move on and whether we need any workarounds to actually conclude the work within UNICOM. That, of course, we will then disseminate as work package 1 to the people within UNICOM and see if we can help them out in these workarounds and in the interim solutions. And of course, we will also discuss it here with a community of expertise to just see, to identify the progress that we're making, so that anyone who's interested can take that on and take that with them to any other projects outside UNICOM that are currently going on in the area of IDMP and medicinal products. So that's the overall process that we're looking at. And as I mentioned, we're still crafting this process, so it's just a first stab at how it could work. The important thing is that we really want to be able to have several iterations across these steps with the SDOs, possibly with coordination meetings across SDOs, to see how we can fix the problems that are hindering us from moving forward within UNICOM, and hopefully we're not the only ones. So we will, through the SDOs, also engage other projects that are experiencing similar problems with the implementation of the standards as they stand now. I've tried to envision how this could work for the problems that we're to discuss later today. So you'll see how it could work in practice, and I welcome your comments and questions. I hope Christian has been following the question and answer box. I can see from the corner of my eye that there's something there, but I cannot read it right now. So if there's anything to answer right now.
If you allow me, I will just comments the two questions. The first thing is, of course, we value your question, really. There is the first one is asking if we have a kind of a risk of a lack of backward compatibility when we will make these standards evolve. So it is our commitment to secure backward compatibility. The way standards have been developed along the history, and not only IDMP, but many others, which we use in our daily life without noticing, the way we have this is that they should be as long as possible backward compatible. And since IDMP hasn't been implemented at all yet, I mean, we have pieces, yes, but hasn't been fully implemented, it would be quite disastrous to have something disruptive in the course of that implementation, which is not limited to Europe, but also, of course, in Europe. The second question is also very interesting. In the proposed overall process, the problems are handed over to SDO, and the solutions are expected to be developed by them. Shouldn't we develop solutions within work package of UNICOM, naturally involving SDO in the process? I mean, this is a good idea, but we have to recognize that each SDO has a process for standards development or maintenance. And this is involving, ballots, processes, etc. Each of the SDO has a different approach to that. So you may convince me 100% to do something, but then I have to convince a couple of hundred experts around the globe to approve that in a ballot. So the right way is that we document in a solid way what we have noticed, what we need. We come with propositions, of course, that's very good. I mean, when I say we, it's UNICOM. We come with propositions and we give that, as Robert was saying, we hand that over to the SDO to implement or to evaluate and implement. You have also to know that the SDO are not others than people like you and me. There are people in it, and it is not forbidden to join an SDO to, I would say, promote an idea or promote a solution. I hope this answers the question at this time. And I'm going now to say a few words for the first gap we want to comment with you this afternoon. So when I'm going to present this, I may not be very long, we have Robert, who is going to say after the steps we envisage, and we have our panelists who will contribute in the conversation according their reaction and their feeling. So the first gap we have identified, we didn't choose the easy ones, I can tell you. You remember the domain is the manufacturing, substances and strength. All the gaps are explained with the same structure. So we have a problem, we expose the problem. I invite you to read the document because it's, of course, a little bit more complete than that. We explain something about the background. We say impact consideration, which is a bit similar to risk analysis, if you want. Then we propose something, and at the end, we address that to one organization, many organizations, or when you see the dots, we don't know exactly who is going to address them, to work on that. We don't know because we cannot impose somebody. For substance and strength, as I suppose you have seen here, we need a global substance identification. If you remember the wedding cake, which you are going to see between all these different gaps, the wedding cake has on the top 3 pillars. One of them is the substance. We need a substance identifier. We can have a local substance identifier. But that will not meet the purpose of a global IDMP. We have to have a global substance identifier. And here the problem is we recognize this is really an issue. We have to have a solution for a global substance identification. And then substance is one thing, the strength comes next, because that has also an impact in the way we identify the pharmaceutical product after. The level of granularity and the strength for the active substance is not always clear. There are some space for interpretation. And of course, if there is a space for interpretation, because this is at the root of the calculation of a pharmaceutical product identifier, if there is some space for interpretation, we might come to different pharmaceutical product identifier when it is actually the same product. And then we have also some uncertainties regarding the role of the ingredients and the strengths, and this also is a problem. I already said regarding the background, too much room for interpretation has an impact on Php Id calculation. Php Id, I hope everybody knows, is pharmaceutical product identifier. The risk, impact consideration, the risk. This is a high risk because, of course, we make all these efforts. I mean, we, worldwide, we have the ambition to have one single pharmaceutical product identifier, so that when we have an issue, we can connect all the medicinal products corresponding to that pharmaceutical product with different level of granularity. If we don't have the same pharmaceutical product identifier, we are not meeting the expectation. So what are the next steps? We propose, or we suggest, yes, to analyze how this is impacting the Php Id, so that we can take action for that. How the type of strength could be chosen to deliver the value for this calculation of the Php Id. We have to see how standards should be interpreted along UNICOM, and this meets a bit the question we had before, because we want, of course, to benefit of this unique experience to understand how these things think, and integrates the result into a documentation. As you can see, the addressee, we have two lines here. We had made a small segmentation. For substance and strength, we expect WHO, UMC, and SNOMED International to work on it to help, define better how that should work. And then substance and governance, here we don't have the solution, but there are some ideas, but we didn't write them here. Robert, shall you speak first, or shall we give the floor to the panelists first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Because then we have...
Go first, I have to turn the slide, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, all right. So we're now at the stage where we have to hand over to the Uppsala Monitoring Center of the WHO and to SNOMED International, who are the addressees of the problem. And then we foresee kind of joint discussion on the substances and strengths with the help of the experts that are united within UNICOM. But we do have already both the Uppsala Monitoring Center and SNOMED International on board. So this would be a good time for Jane and Malin to jump in and tell a little bit about how you foresee the process as it is listed here from my perspective, or from the work package 1 perspective. But how would that work within your organization? And did you already do anything on this topic?
Yeah, should I start, Jane, or?
Please start, Malin. That's absolutely fine.
Okay, so I think our UMC's primary strength is maybe substances. Of course, we work with strengths all the time as well, but I think Jane has a really good input there. So I start with the substances. So of course, since a global substance ID is a prerequisite for a global PHP ID, and that is something that UMC are working on, we of course already looked into this issue, and I mean we deal with this every day using the global dictionary that we have for pharmacovigilance activities within the WHO program for international drug monitoring. So we currently have substances from 170 countries that we are dealing with. What we can see here is that there are, of course, for some substances, there are issues. But we think that with the revision of the technical specification for the ISO 19844 that is ongoing, there will be really good support to define the information that is actually needed for unique substance identification. So I think for the issues we have today, that will probably solve them. Then regarding the governance, as Christian said, there hasn't really been much official communication there, but we have had communications with the WHO headquarters and some regulators regarding the creation of global substance IDs and how UMC could contribute, but this is not set at any stage yet.
Thank you, Marlene. Jane?
Thank you, Marlene, thank you for that. And we certainly at SNOMED International see this as an opportunity to work with yourselves very closely. And you and I have already started to discuss this and have it on our to-do list to get this going well before the end of the year. I think what's important to remember that SNOMED is at the clinical end of care. And at the start of this chain, and it doesn't matter whether it's UNICOM or it's pharmacovigilance outside UNICOM. It doesn't matter what it is. The users will be encountering having to link to SNOMED in the clinical record, right across to IDMP, to MEDRA, whatever it is. So and this is for all elements, including substances. So, and we would agree that a global substance identifier is key, and we're happy to work with whoever the right people are. And I think starting with Marlene, as we've already said, is the key way to start on that. We've got, as everybody knows, a large substance database within SNOMED CT, which we're doing a lot of work on at the moment. So it's very, very timely. And we can, where there are clear global requirements, we can get work turned around very quickly. We don't have to wait for a ballot. What we have to wait for is requirements that are global. And that's the key thing. And so we do a January release and a July release. And we'd be cutting it fine for the January release for anything at this point, but we can certainly do for July next year, starting to do anything that's required in this space. And I think also I understand, because my colleagues are messaging me as we speak, that we are having discussions at the moment about managing equivalent strengths expressions, because we know that the local levels, they're all different, and it's about how we can standardize and manage support local implementation. So I think those are the key things that I want to make at this point, but we are there to support. If the standard is developed within WHO, that's fine. But we will then need to make sure we work with WHO and alongside Marlene to make sure at the clinical end of it, we can make sure there can be movement between the two. Ideally, we don't want to be introducing two standards at the same time, but we can work together.
No, and I fully agree, Jane. I mean, as long as, I mean, there should be the global substance IDs, and that's what we all need, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, with the strength, I mean, there are issues there as well, but I think with the discussions that we have ongoing now, within UNICOM, I think, and with the great work that's been done with the pilot product list that Jane been heavily involved in, I think we are putting the finger on a lot of problems there that would that could be easily solved, I think.
And we have somebody straight away that we can put forward to work with this. We can just discuss it strategically, and then we've got somebody in the team who is ready when we're ready to get on with this.
Thank you. Robert?
Maybe answer one of the questions that came up. What's the relationship with the EU SRS program? Anyone here want to respond to that, or do we need to reach out to someone in the audience? If someone in the audience want to answer this, please raise your hand.
Well, we can say one thing, because the question actually sounds a little bit different. Which role does European SRS play here, including FDA, and how is this coordinated across actors? So EU SRS is European and FDA is not. So we have different projects to develop substance registries at the regulatory level, and they are in close contact to work on an agreement. It's not exactly the same, it's different, not exactly the same as what Malin was saying, because the global substance identifier we are now looking for is something which will be less precise than what the regulator want to do and have to do because of IP protections, among else. Malin, do you agree with that?
Well, I think for generally, it depends on where in the process that you want to have the global substance IDs, of course. But for now that we've been talking about the PHP IDs, that they should be for marketed products. At that stage, I think we have all the information available that's needed for a global substance ID. But we have to look at the use cases for creating an early global substance ID in the process before a product is marketed. And that's where I think the challenges are. So I think we need to look into the use cases there and see how to solve that. I, however, think that the work that's been done by EU SRS and FDA, I mean, FDA has also been working on this for many, many years, harmonizing their substance registry. It's a great work, and it's like a really good starting point to create global identifiers for substances. So, I mean, a lot of work is already done.
Yes, and actually, we had part of an answer on the chat box, which says that the national competent authorities in Europe are going to use the EU SRS to generate their PHP ID. This is not a big problem per se, but it will not be a global PHP ID. That's the reason why here the challenge is to serve local and global needs. And if locally, say the US are not going to stop with their current substance identifier, that's not a problem, but it's also not a global identifier at the end of the day, and that's the global we need. Robert, you want to say something? I notice.
No.
Oh, it's written. Robert Stegwee would like to answer this question in direct. We are, Robert and myself, we are discovering how this is working, the webinar with Zoom. Well, we look at other questions to see if they are open or not. So, but I see here the PHP ID will be based on multiple input parameters, not only the substance ID. In general, the PHP ID should be automatically calculated based on control terms and relevant ID. That's fully right. That's fully right. And we are exactly talking about substance ID. And the colleague who wrote that correct remark is the same as the one who's saying the NCA in Europe are going to use the EU SRS ID. Please do so. I mean, but keep in mind that at some point of time we will have to use the global identifications. Otherwise, we are failing in our mission, global mission, I mean. A question, it's a very good question. Do you see the risk that aiming at global SRS, we will stop the ongoing European SRS project? No, not at all. The two things are different. Of course, we speak about substance, but the two things are different. One is meeting a local need where we have to harmonize anyway the substances in Europe, and the other one, substance ID in Europe, and the other one is to achieve a bit the same, but at global level.
And maybe we can say something about the drug bank ID question as well. I think the drug bank ID comes into play at the, if I understand things right, at the medical or medicines database level. So there will be a linkage, but we will not, as far as I understand it, use the drug bank ID as the global substance ID. It's different things.
Yeah, the way which has been chosen by the experts, and by the way, the experts are mainly from the national competent authorities, the way which has been chosen to come to a substance ID is to look at the composition of the substance, not on the effects, the clinical effects, and other characteristics. So probably one of the good example of something in place is the UNI from the US, because they were already going that way. A comment from an American colleague: a related challenge even for straightforward strength, such as 600 milligram tablets, or is it 0.6 gram, is the need for a reference strength. What's the process for its designation, and where will these be stored and managed? This is exactly one of the issues we have exactly pointed out, and I think this is a very good example of the challenges we have. And this is requiring that some organization, and we were thinking at SNOMED together with the UMC to work on that. Robert, would you like to?
No, I'm just clicking the questions that you answer live. So I pop up that in your screen that I want to answer, but basically you do. I just want to get rid of the answered questions in the Q&A box.
Well, a good friend of mine says, as a principle, a unilateral approach is not European thinking. Oh, yes, you're right. Yes, but I don't think we are, we are boosting a unilateral approach. IDMP has been conceived in such a way that you can have regional, if not national, regional implementation, but we need also to have this global approach, which is not unilateral. For the globality, we need to search the common denominator, and we are working on that we will speak about that in a moment, for pharmaceutical dose forms, for instance. Okay. And exactly, this is the comments which I read here on my screen. Voyons. Maybe I suggest we move to the next gap, because otherwise we will not have time to cover all that. Does another panelist want to express him or herself? Right. Good. Then we move. And if the case you haven't understood what is the wedding cake, you have it here. The second gap comes from that domain, regulation. And we say we have an issue here. It's about Php Id calculation and governance. See, we had the substance, and now we have the Php Id. And for those who are not so familiar with the wedding cake, the substance, this is the pink pillar, and the pharmaceutical product is the blue sphere. So there is a close relationship between the two. They are not the only one, but they are the most complicated probably at the moment. What did we say in the gap analysis about this issue, Php Id calculation and governance? The problem is different level of substance specification will cause issue in calculating Php Id. The background, the Php Id calculation, and remember it's a calculation because you have some incoming information and then an algorithm generating the pharmaceutical product identifier. So this calculation needs to be addressed with a single source of truth. Because if you put, you have a medicinal product with pharmaceutical product, sorry, with three substances, ABC, you put ABC in the algorithm or CBA in the algorithm, and you don't necessarily have the same result. So somebody, an organization should have the importance to say this is the truth. Php Id can be issued regionally. This is what I was answering to our NCA colleague before, but the purpose of IDMP is to be global. We can do that regionally. It will already help a lot. And it's certainly very good, but we need a global approach. And we need a precise algorithm and a single maintenance or governance organization. Impact consideration, so the risk somehow. We need the SEO to collaborate to a common definition to come to a kind of an agreement between all of us. The definitions should be validated against real data, and this is UNICOM an extraordinary opportunity for us. Critical prerequisites for any IDMP implementation. This is really important. The next step is to analyze how the issues regarding substances and strength are impacting Php Id calculation, have a better understanding of all these impacts, remove ambiguities in the Php Id calculation, and define the maintenance or governance organization. The addressee for Php Id calculation and governance process, we have a pilot product list in work at UNICOM. Fabulous, an opportunity to be testing us to real data. And for those who are not aware, the next community of expertise will be dedicated to the pilot product list. And for the PHP assignment and calculation, also UNICOM has to play a role. At least for the UNICOM project, we have to come to some agreements. Maybe it is on hand, but it is an opportunity for UNICOM. Now I hand over to Robert.
Yes, because it's clear that we have to work with the other UNICOM work packages that will be using the pilot product list. Mainly Robert van Stegwee is our go-to person to do this, but you might also have seen in the overview of work package 1 that we will start by the end of the year in preparing both the regulatory or the adverse event reporting processes and the clinical processes in 2 separate streams, where we have more intense collaboration on the use of the pilot product list. And we will have a joint discussion on how to do the PHP ID calculation within the product list. And we will reach out, and we have already talked to Marlene and Jane again about this. So maybe, and you can read what other options are out there. What we really want to do is really try and see if we can establish a process, test it out, and then bring it for consideration to the broader SDO audience. So we don't wait on the audience, and this links into a question that was posed earlier. In this respect, we will do the work together with the SDOs, and then at some point the SDOs need to make a decision whether this is the direction that they want to adopt as well. But maybe Robert, you want to say a little bit about the pilot product list?
It's a very pragmatic approach where frequent drugs that are relevant to the cross-border projects and were already selected in the European e-health platform are brought together to form a list of 35 substances for which we now will have to define how the substance will be defined also as to granularity and by which numbers for the PHP ID construction.
Okay, thank you. And I understand, Marlene, that you're already working towards doing the actual calculations on the pilot product list. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have had many discussions with Bob and had really good input from Jane and others that constructed the pilot product list. So we are starting to look at the first prioritized substances there to see if we can generate some kind of a pilot for the PHP ID. Yeah. And it's the pilot product list is a really good starting point here. I'm sure, or I can already see now, it's pinpointing a lot of the problems that we have discussed before about the PHP ID generation. So this would be really good to exemplify the different problems that we face and see how do we actually solve these.
Very good, and then we'll bring that experience together and maybe have a number of iterations to actually make sure where we want to go and share that again with you here in the community of expertise on how we propose together with the SDOs to move forward on the actual calculation of PHP IDs.
There's a question. Okay.
Yes. Yes, we are using I think we are using the 35 substances from the EU SRS, but Robert can probably.
You're on mute.
The Annette Rosema from Work Package 2, who is also project leader of the data cleansing project in EU SRS, has kindly accepted to get into a relationship with Work Package 9. And together with Ursula Chorm and Julie James, there have been several meetings and with her experts also to identify for these 35 substances at different level of granularities, what different systems like UNI, like CAS, like SNOMED, like the European system actually use as number so that we, and then they also align this with their data cleansing activity, which is really important. And I think this remarkable cooperation between the EMA and FDA, between the EU SRS and UNICOM, and the concrete elaboration of the 35 substances has brought already many insights, and I think this will be very instrumental to solve things that remain in the dark, that remain undecided, that remain unclear.
Thank you.
There's a message from us that they will prioritize the cleansing, of course.
Yeah. And we must be very grateful that Work Package 2 and the EU SRS cleansing team has stepped in so willingly and so quickly into this project of UNICOM.
And then there's a question for Malin. I'm not sure whether you can read the question, Malin.
Yes, yes, of course. The question was that once you have calculated the PHP IDs, will you be able to check if this would fit with the information on the medicines as provided in the ICSRs? And of course, I mean, this is one of our goals. And if we wouldn't calculate the PHP IDs ourselves, we would anyway need to harmonize the information to fit the global data that we have. So this was one of the starting points of actually starting to discuss if we could contribute to the global PHP ID generation.
Okay, thank you. There's a more specific question by Diederik that I hope we can answer offline. I'd like to move on to the next topic, if that's okay with you, because we only have 25 minutes to go for another 3 problems. So
yeah, exactly. So we now come to the central pillar, dissemination and information, and here we selected a subject which is EDQM standard terms. The problem is, but I think we already a bit touched this in the previous conversations, granularity of concept and code sets vary in clinical processes. So we have a discrepancy between the ideal words and the real practice in the clinic, but also in the, I would say at the registration level, NCA level. Backwards compatibility issue. This is also responding indirectly a question which was raised before. This is a problem. We want, if we evolve, we want to remain backwards compatible. The background, EDQM provides a set of reference values of different granularities. It does not provide a kind of aggregated sets, which would help IDMP implementation, where the full EDQM standard term cannot be used. This is a gap, another a barrier to IDMP implementation. So it is a high risk that we are facing here. The proposed next step is to define a simplified value set sustained by, as you can read, transparent ontology and used across IDMP implementations, not only in the regulatory space, but across the implementations. Addressee, it's actually ISO TC 215 working group 6, and you can read here in bracket started. This is something which was, recognized, but we had to say it in the gap. Analysis was recognized before.
So based on process, we did already do a handover to ISO 215 working group 6, and of course ISO will reach out to EDQM to discuss, and where necessary we will bring people on board in the working group 6 meetings or in any breakout meetings that they have, so that we can come to an agreement on an aggregated value set. And hopefully that won't take too long, but we will find out from the experts and from the people doing this how long that might take. And in the meantime, we can think of interim solutions and discuss them with them as well. So that's the fairly straightforward process. I'll just call upon Christian as convener of Working Group 6 to add a little bit about his expectations of this process and from the perspective of ISO.
Well, I want to be brief on this because as I wrote it in the bracket, the work has started yet. We have an expert group already defined and they had their first meeting And from what I understood, we are going in that direction, that we will have something simpler and backwards compatible. In that group, we have, I wouldn't say plenty, but we have many expertise from the national competent authorities. We have people who are also involved in Work Package 1, such as Robert van der Stichele. And we have, as a project lead, the gentleman at EDQM, who is leading this effort anyway there, and who was also the lead for the development of the ISO norm. So I think if the standardization process will not be finished very quickly, because we have some timelines and constraint, but the results will be known, I would say, probably in a few months only. So.
Okay. Very good. There is some extra information coming in from Georg.
Oh. Yeah, shall I read that perhaps?
Yeah,
for information, NCA will utilize EMA RMS, referential management system, or terminology server for new product and variation of existing product data. RMS integrates different terminology providers like Medra, but I would say primarily like EDQM. The Work Package 4 member will map to this, which makes sense. Of course, it makes sense. But RMS is also including EDQM, or the terminology is correct when we say EDQM standard terms. I suggest, because of the time, we can go to the next. We come here from the domain prescription and dispensation, and we wanted to speak about the dispensing. What is the problem? As I think everybody knows, the doctor prescribes and somebody different might be dispensed. And even if it is not different, it has to be captured exactly what say product it is, with identification badge and possibly serial number, especially in today's world. And another problem is that we don't have a defined message to send back the information to the prescriber. What is the background? E-prescription service vary depending on the countries, of course, and the different regulations, especially regarding generics. We wrote generics here instead of substitution, because that is a hot topic, as I think everybody knows. But generics, if you prescribe this, and you may give a biosimilar. Difficulties to track medicines, adverse events, and effective supply chain management. That's another background. But the risk we have here is patient safety. It's relatively obvious, I think. The proposed next step, we want to have, out of IDMP, the list of information we should look at for this process, what is exactly relevant to that process. Product data and prescription data should be added in existing messages, because some of the message for the information back do exist, but they don't necessarily include what we want them to include. And we say also that we would need a logical model for the e-dispensation. Addressee, we have for the e-dispensing item and attributes a number of addressee, SEN, ISO, usually they are together, HL7 and IG. And for the IDMP logical model for e-dispensing, so working group 6 to be short.
Now, this is one of the things that we already talked about with the BR&R work group within HL7 International. That's where we need to start work on what are the IDMP attributes that are to be included in any e-dispensing model, or in the e-dispensing messages that are out there already or have been thought of. And that's where we have to start work on. So maybe Hugh, you want to weigh in here, and then Jose can follow up from an IHE perspective.
Yeah, sure. So I think we need to make a distinction here between process and content. The process flows in prescribing, dispensing, administration, and so on have been looked at many times within the pharmacy work group within HL7. And we've had conversations with IHE on regular occasions through the years. So the basic packages of what those messages are, I think, are reasonably well understood. Where I think there is two issues outstanding, the first, as you say on the slide here, is precisely what attributes do we need to capture. Just making sure that we have got all of those attributes present within the models. But it is adding attributes to existing ideas rather than having to go out and completely crank this out from scratch. I think the other thing that has to be looked at is the exact nature of the model, because different national systems work on different bases. Some things work back maybe on not exactly paper-based systems, but on some of the very simple early standards that were done. Some of them are done on much more recent things. Most of the new development now, I think, is getting done with the HL7 Fire standard. It exists. I'm not sure that it's all been worked through in the as much detail as it will need to be. But I think all of these things are, in a sense, standard processes to be worked at within the HL7 work groups to get the details sorted out.
Thank you. Jose, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks Hugh for mentioning the collaboration that needs to happen between different working groups in HL7, and then as IHE pharmacy co-chair, it's just another working group. So this is the one point that will require intense articulation between the working groups. So for example, if for satisfying the need in UNICOM to have all this information that we need to identify precisely what has been dispensed, so it's not just the substance that matters, although clinically we can say that the most important is the substance and the dose form. From a pharmacovigilance perspective, in some cases that might be enough, but we don't want to capture that. We want to capture everything down to the lot number and maybe the serial number, answering Jean-Gonzague's question. In some cases it might be necessary. So we want to capture the information as it is available. And for this, IHE, for example, we cannot make the resource, we cannot make the standards. We have to engage with ISO and with HL7 to say, please provide us the tools to do this. And that is where the different processes that you was talking about, we need to validate this. So the challenge here is not whether the processes have been defined, it's indeed which attributes do we need, and can we ensure consistency, because in the regulatory space, we know how to define a product. In the prescription space and dispensing space, we are typically used to say, here's a code and that's it. But we are seeing that this is not enough because the code is not recognized. So we have to see what attributes can we do it. And then we have to go back to HL7, for example, and say, we need to have a possibility to define a product, not for regulatory purposes, but within a prescription or within a dispense messages. So we have to provide all those attributes, whether it's just one code with a lot number or it's a lot of attributes. And this is where we need to engage and to work this together, so that at the end, or throughout the UNICOM project, we can validate that this actually works from end to end.
I think that last point is really an important one, because that links back to the UNICOM work packages, where we can actually test it out, and also we have our work stream within work package 1 to do certification of systems through the IHE Connectathon process, together with all the standards that are out there. And we do need to work together on this this topic with a number of work packages, the cross-border work package, but also the medical dictionaries work package. So there will be quite some collaboration going on there, and some intense discussions, I assume, on what needs to happen. But we also welcome everyone from the community of expertise to weigh in and to suggest projects that have already done a lot of this work, where we can look at and integrate that work, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel if it's already running in a car somewhere else.
I think Joseph wants the question of this. Yes.
Yeah, just a short question on Peter's short answer on Peter's question. I don't think we need, and I don't think there's ever the intention to harmonize the dispense processes in anywhere, because we know that difference. What we want is to support the variety without trying to say everyone must dispense exactly with these attributes. No, what we want to do is to say, if you say color, if you need to define the color of the package, sorry for the bad example, but that's one valid example as any. If the dispense needs to say, I dispense the red package, not the blue package, at least we should know that the color is the color of the package, not the color of the tablet. So this is where UNICOM will use IDMP to say, we know there's a broad variety of scenarios here. We don't want to enforce one way of dispensing, definitely one way of substitution. We cannot do that, but we can provide ways that different systems can become compatible at last. That is our goal, is to harmonize within that diversity.
Yeah, in other words, enable diversity.
Voilà.
Yeah.
Can I make one extra point, which is Robert mentioned connectathons in an IHE context. Connectathons happen also in the HL7 context, and I'm responsible for organizing things really for a whole string of connectathons going forwards. One of the things that I'm seeing at the moment is quite a strong degree of interest in looking at the various FHIR developments that are making use of the IDMP structures. They're actually looking at it from areas that are outside what UNICOM is looking at the moment. But I think the fact that we're making a start on that really suggests that there would be a good opportunity here for bringing use cases like the dispensing to the HL7 connectathons to explore the suitability of the resources and how we represent the attributes, really over a succession of connectathons during the course of the next 12 months. I think that would be a very valuable thing to do. And I think BR&R within HL7 can help facilitate that process.
Thank you for your offer, and we'll definitely take it to the work packages that actually can come with some of the real-life examples of what needs to be done together with us. Thank you. Yes, Christian, the fifth gap, the final gap.
Yeah, and the conclusion. The final gap is supply chain. You know, this is also a bit influenced by the COVID expense somehow. The problem is identifying the supply chain have different life cycles than identifying the regulatory process and prescription activities. We think that it would be efficient to have a register where these identifiers are linked and maintained at national level. Backgrounds, incorporating all these identifiers, which you see here listed, in a kind of a portfolio, ideally governed by the NCA, would be actually a good way to go. And the PHP ID has the purpose, and not the substance, the PHP ID has the purpose to facilitate the international cooperation. And I don't think we have time to speak extensively about COVID, but our Committee of Expertise in December will address the COVID. What can we learn from the COVID to support our activities? Impact consideration, again, the risk. We think this is an important tool which should be available for the support of our operations at UNICOM as from next year. And the best would be to have some countries involved in the cross-border prescription who could be engaged in that. Proposed next step is to create such a portfolio for UNICOM pilot product lists. And the addressee are to UNICOM and GS1. Robert?
Yeah, so the process is fairly straightforward, and you might recognize the pictures. Of course, it's up to GS1 to take this on and to discuss the maintenance of such a portfolio. And hopefully we can get GS1 with 2 or 3 NCAs to actually pilot such a portfolio along the lines of the pilot product list within UNICOM. And of course, we'll be able to test the results in with those work packages that are using the pilot product list as well, and we'll keep you updated as usual through the community of expertise. There's some.
We have 2 questions. Yeah.
Yes.
What does DCID stands for?
It's already answered. That's good.
Good. And not all RX products have a DCID. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. I propose that we go to the conclusion, which Robert and myself are going to sing together. It's a chorus, you know. I think this is my slide. I hope it is graphically correct. And the purpose of that is to just to remember all the attendants that we have a source of information. UNICOM work packages, especially these ones, are extraordinarily important because we are in the course of an implementation. It's very seldom that the implementer has the opportunity to give a feedback to the SDO, and this the role of the work package one is to make the inventory of the standards which might be impacted and organize, you know, these information so that we have a communication and information useful for the target audience, namely the standard developers. So they do something, they understand what is required from the real life to make the standards work. It's a very unique opportunity. We have, I think, very seldom had this, if ever, in our space. So that's, I want to emphasize that the input, the source of information is extraordinarily important. And there is an opportunity not only for the UNICOM work packages, but also the community of expertise. Your questions in the Q&A, your questions are also valuable to us because they reveal where the problem are, where people are scared or misunderstand. Robert?
Yeah, sorry, I've lost my screen.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is really, it is a milestone for us, and it has been discussed during the preparatory meetings for the UNICOM project, whether this should be an end product or an early product, and we decided it should be an early product. So the initial gap analysis is really here. We want to keep adding to it as we come across new gaps and issues, and we'll keep track of what's being done in terms of solving the issues either on an interim or on a structural basis, and validate those solutions as well through the application within the UNICOM work packages. We will revise and we'll bring out a revised version in 2021, but actually we will be working on it on a bi-weekly basis, because that's when all the SDOs meet within the framework of work package 1, and we will be discussing the progress on all the issues and gaps that have been analyzed, and we'll provide you with regular updates as a community of expertise as well. So that's what we wanted to share with you. We thank you all for your comments, and I'll leave it to Christian to close the session.
Thank you. But there was a question, but I made a wrong manipulation, of course, and so it has been moved. Georg, you write, for information and question, NCA forwarded comments to EMA implementation guide for product management system. Did work package 1 also send comments? The answer is yes, we did. Actually, not as work package 1, but we were channeling comments from the standard development organization. We had two main streams of information. One is from ISO, and one is from IHE. We aggregated that, but you have to know that after our aggregation, it has gone together with the industry, where they had to aggregate and validate. And here, I don't know how many of our comments, something like 100, how many of our comments have passed through and reached EMA. Now, I don't know. Here we are. Now, it is time to close the session. I think we had a very, very intense conversation, and it's really fabulous on my perception. You know, we have a questionnaire here, which I'm going to ask you to fill, please. We have to understand what is your feeling about today's session. You were not blind, but we were blind. We did not see you. But because of the number, it is probably the best way to go. You have barely been able to speak. Actually, we technically could have done that, but practically we did not. I think with the Q&A, we have had a good exchange, and with the panel, we had also an opportunity to bring some dynamism in this session. So thank you for those who answer before leaving. I see the number of attendants is sinking dangerously. Please reply these questions. It's quickly done. In a short while, I'm going to close really physically the session. We have in 1 month the next community of expertise. As I announced, it will be on the pilot product list. It will be again a very dynamic meeting, I'm sure. We have outstanding participants, presenter and panelists. And in December, we have another one with COVID. What are the learnings we can capture from the COVID crisis? Next year, we have also a couple of ideas for community of expertise. One will be on the pharmaceutical dose form, but we will see. If you have inputs, don't hesitate to drop us an email either to me or to Nictis has a special mailbox for that. It is unicom@nictis.nl, and you drop your request or your proposition there. Okay, we have now 75% of the remaining participants having voted. I'm closing the questionnaire. 1, 2, 3, it is closed now. I hope, yeah, you can see now the results on your screen. On my end, I see nothing else than the results. So we have half of the participants had a fully satisfaction regarding their satisfaction to join here, and interested to have feedback about what we do, 40%, which is also very encouraging. Okay, I'm closing now the questionnaire completely, and I will thank you again for having joined, and we see you as soon as possible, but latest in 1 month. Thank you and good weekend. Keep safe. Bye-bye.